I just got hired by Google as a software engineer, and in this video, I'm going to take you through everything that happens leading up from me applying all the way to me landing the job. To give you some context, back in 2021, when I finished university, I actually interviewed at Google once already, and it really didn't go that well, to be honest. The interview was really difficult, or so I thought. I spent 40 minutes implementing DFS, even though it had nothing to do with the problem. To be quite frank, I didn't even understand what the problem was asking. I ended up choosing Abbott as the company that I would be going with before I even got any sort of feedback from Google. Probably because I thought that they were going to reject me anyway, and to be truthful, I think they would have, because it really wasn't a strong interview. So the way this whole thing actually started was with a recruiter reaching out to me via email, and I've thrown it up on screen so you can read it for yourself. So we ended up scheduling a call together. The call itself was really casual. All it entailed was just me talking with the recruiter and kind of explaining what my current position is, what languages I use, and the sorts of experience that I have regarding technologies, frameworks, and just general concepts like embedded devices. So the recruiter ended up confirming that they did in fact want to continue moving forward with me, and what we would do is we would have a prep call. The entire point of this prep call was really for him to give me some material that I could study as a way to prepare for the upcoming phone screening interview. He ended up sending me a PDF that contained some basic tips and tricks that I could use during the interviews, and it had a list of some data structures and algorithms that they recommend you study, but really it's nothing groundbreaking. It's just telling you the things that you probably should be studying before going into any technical interview. So the phone screening is usually the first type of technical interview that you'll do. It's a 45-minute long Leetcode style question interview where all you have to do is just solve the problem, and usually you'll be asked things about time complexity, maybe you have to do some optimizations, but it's really nothing special. So in my case, I think I got really lucky because my interviewer was super nice, and honestly, the problem was actually pretty okay. I managed to solve it in around 20 minutes, which really took me by surprise because I thought I was going to need the entire 45 minutes. So after I finished solving the problem, I did take another 10 minutes just to dry run the code. I came up with my own example just to check for some edge cases. And then in the end, I actually had some time left, which I could use to just talk with my interviewer. So the general rule of thumb is that after you complete your phone screening, you usually wait for around 1 to 2 weeks until you get feedback, letting you know whether you move on to the next interview phase or if you get rejected. So in my case, it actually went a little bit faster. I got confirmation after about 5 days. And the nice thing is that they don't schedule the interviews for you. So what that means is that you actually get a link to Google Calendar where you can then pick the interview times that would suit you with like 1 or 2 backup times just in case they don't find any availability at all for the selected times that you've provided. So in total, there's 4 interviews that you do, or at least that was the case for me. So 3 of those are code interviews, which are basically the same as the phone screening, just that now you're doing them in the next stage. And there's one Googleyness interview, as it's called, which is really just a behavioral interview. So let's talk about Leetcode. Leetcode is one of those things that no one really wants to do generally, but everyone kind of has to. And although I understand why it's annoying, because frankly, I find it annoying as well at times, I can also see the benefit of it. For me, I already started practicing Leetcode a little bit before my phone screening, but the real grind started after I got confirmation. I think I spent every night just grinding as many Leetcode problems as I possibly could. And in total, I ended up completing roughly 400 questions from getting confirmation all the way to my last technical interview. And I have to say, in the beginning, it sucked. It was absolutely awful. I could barely do easy problems, everything was frustrating, my code was slow, and I really didn't know the Python APIs well enough, or the standard lib for that fact, to make effective use of it. Now, in the beginning, that was really frustrating, because I felt like I was way less efficient than I had even imagined I would be. I haven't done Leetcode in ages, so I kind of knew that I wouldn't be great at it, but I never imagined that I'd be this bad. Now, one of the things I actually started to do was to take a step back and to hard focus on the basics. So, even though I knew what arrays are, I understood trees, I figured that why not go through them again and really drill them down? Because in the end, all of the complicated things are just specific applications of the basics. Another thing that I did to kind of simulate an interview setting was to set a 45-minute timer and to try and complete problems within that time frame. I didn't allow myself to look at the solutions or hints or anything. Basically what it was is I have to struggle for 45 minutes, and if I can't figure it out, then I should look at the solution. I did this because I actually wanted to see how well I could do without looking at any solutions or getting any tips. I just wanted to figure out where I am in terms of my knowledge. But the biggest thing that ended up being a game changer in my case was to actually talk out loud whenever I was doing the problem. The reason why is because it forces you to really articulate what you're thinking, and when you're doing it quietly in your head, you kind of lock yourself in that little box where you just go around in circles at some point, and you don't really see that you're actually doing something wrong. But when you're saying things out loud, you're actually forced to listen to yourself. And that was the key. When I started doing that, I noticed that half of the time I had misunderstood the problem, or I had misinterpreted some specific part of it. And by saying it out loud, I was able to catch that. And that's where I really started to figure out what my weaknesses were in terms of what algorithms I'm not that confident with and what concepts I really have to review. Towards the end, doing Leetcode actually became really fun. The major reason for this was, after actually doing and understanding all the core algorithms, it made it so much easier to figure out what I should be doing when given a problem, because I was able to spot the kind of algorithm or data structure that applied to it. You can think of this like building a house. Instead of having to draw up the plans and then get the material and build the whole thing, I already had the plan and the materials. All I had to do was stick it together and follow the instructions. And that's exactly what I did. One of the really nice things is the fact that you actually get to pick what language you're going to use for the code interviews. So they don't prescribe a specific language that you're forced to use depending on the role, at least not in my experience. So for me, I actually decided to go with Python just because I really like the language. I like the fact that it's very simple and that I can think more about the actual problem rather than having to wrestle with some specifics of the language. So I had 3 interviews, and one thing that was interesting was each interview was conducted slightly differently. So one interview was in the style of, we're designing an API, we've got these requirements, let's go. Another one was a pretty simple question in of itself, but then it had the added caveat of, well, can we do this in big O of 1? And to me, that was probably the most difficult one, and it took me the longest. I think I spent 40 minutes actually implementing the solution. It was correct, it was optimal, simple, but it did take the longest just because of this one constraint. The last one was probably the most tricky conceptually. The actual implementation wasn't that difficult, but it was more about figuring out what the problem was really asking. Again, I was able to solve it optimally, the interviewer was happy, but it just goes to show that just because you had one interview that was conducted in a specific style, it doesn't mean that the others will be conducted in the same style. For me, I always had one problem to solve, which was nice, and I think it makes a lot of sense to do it that way, because you get to focus on this one problem and really thoroughly go through it and figure out the solution. The final interview that I had to go through in this stage was the behavioral interview, or as it's sometimes called, the Googleyness interview. Now, unlike the code interviews, I didn't study for this very long. I think in total I actually only studied for about a day, mainly because I didn't really know what to study. It's very open because they ask you a series of either hypothetical questions or questions that relate to your previous experience in the workplace. And because I don't know what they're gonna ask, it makes it pretty difficult to actually prepare for this. I was nervous with the coding interviews just because I knew they would be difficult, but here I was even more nervous, more so because I had actually never done it before, so I didn't really know what would be expecting me. The interview was supposed to last around 30 to 45 minutes, but it actually ended up going for way longer. I think we talked for about an hour and 15 minutes, something in that range. I prepared roughly 30 questions that I thought would make for a really interesting conversation and that will give me some more insight into the culture at Google. The questions that I prepared covered a really wide range of topics. So it included things like the kinds of social clubs that Google offers, but also things like just the culture in general. How do people deal with failure? What happens when someone makes a mistake? Where do people focus when there's a problem? Those sorts of things that would just give me a better insight into what kind of company I would actually be going into. Not only did this give me something that I could talk about with the interviewer that was actually valuable, but I think what it did is it actually made it so that the interviewer kind of saw that I was going into this with a very genuine mindset. Because at the end of the day, they're not only interviewing me, I'm also evaluating whether I actually want to work there. After completing all my interviews, I was told by my recruiter that the process of getting feedback can take between 3 to 4 weeks, so they let me know that I should brace for a pretty long wait. Instead of waiting for 4 weeks, I actually only had to wait for 6 days. So I don't know what happened, but clearly someone pressed the turbo button and sped things all the way along. The recruiter called me in the morning and he had some pretty good news. He confirmed that I had passed all my interviews and apparently I had gotten really good scores. He congratulated me again and then let me know that I have 18 months to find a team at Google who would be interested in me as an engineer. The way this works is my profile will be sent into a pool where hiring managers who will be interested could pick it out and will contact me for a team matching call. The final interview that I would have would be a team matching call with my potential hiring manager. The recruiter then told me that getting into a team matching call could take multiple months, so I should brace myself. He said that because I'm an L3 engineer, there's not that many positions open. Funnily enough, I actually didn't have to wait that long at all, not even close. I had to wait for like 6 days until I actually got into a team matching call. Again, I did prepare my own questions. It wasn't that many this time around. I think it was maybe around 15 or so, but it was enough to really give me an idea of what the position would entail. Even though the call was supposed to be 30 minutes long, we actually ended up talking for over an hour. And again, the only reason why we actually stopped talking was because the internet ended up crashing. After this call, I contacted my recruiter and I let him know that I would be interested in joining this team because the work not only sounded interesting, but because I thought that I would be a pretty good fit for them. September 26th ended up being the day where I got an official offer extended to me. The hiring manager had gotten back to my recruiter and let him know that they were also of the opinion that I would be a really good fit for the team. One thing that I didn't mention was that the position was actually going to be in London, so I'm gonna have to relocate. I'll throw the actual email that I got with the official offer being extended up on screen now, so you can read through that if you're interested. I did study in the UK, so it's not like I'm completely unaware of what I'm going into. And as much as I love Switzerland, and it will always be my home, I want to take this leap of faith because it's a really cool opportunity for me. Just in general, I think it's valuable to do things that are outside of your comfort zone, because in the end, that's how you grow as a person. To recap, I went from applying to a bunch of different positions at Google because I thought it would be funny to actually getting hired. I grinded a bunch of Leetcode to prepare, and I went through 6 different interviews. Google gets so many applications per year. I think it's around 3 million. Out of those, less than 1% actually get into Google. I wouldn't worry about being rejected. Always do your best and just learn from your mistakes, because in the end, that's what matters. Don't compare yourself to other people. The only person that you need to compare yourself with is you from yesterday. Thank you so much for watching, and if you have any questions regarding my interview experience or general questions that you think I might be able to answer, feel free to just plop them down into the comments and I'll see that I can get to them. If you're interested in what I do as a job currently, then I've linked to a video that I've done previously that should give you some more info about that. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe, and I plan on taking all of you along with me on this journey, relocating from Switzerland to London. Stay tuned for the next one, and I wish you an awesome day.